Welcome to Victoria Electric Vehicle Association on YouTube, where you get all your best EV and solar info. Today we're with Alec Tsang from BC Hydro. He is their EV infrastructure god, and today he's going to talk in our part 2 of a 3-part series about medium and heavy duty EV infrastructure. Alec.
Thank you, Glenn. Very appreciative of the invitation to do this for you, to talk about my favorite topic. So a little bit about myself. I'm a long-term employee at BC Hydro, over 20 years at BC Hydro, and very fortunate to be doing most of those years in this role of doing work on electric vehicles. All right, I'm going to launch right into it. Again, I want to thank you, Victoria Electric Vehicle Association, for inviting me to do this. Okay, so just to give a kind of a explanation of the market and how we look at it. So when we talk about medium heavy duty vehicles, it's much more challenging, and we try to dissect it by vehicle class, and by vehicle class it's classified by vehicle weight. And this is a fairly standard classification that's out there in the industry, ranging from class 1 light duty vehicles, your cars, up to class 8, which is your refuse trucks, fire trucks, buses, semi trucks, etc. So I won't get into the details here, but this gives you a sense of the variation of vehicle types and sizes. And point would be, the larger the vehicle, the larger the charging power required to enable that vehicle to function and conduct its duties. So here, I just want to quickly talk about just kind of a market snapshot from a global perspective, taken from Bloomberg last year. So this kind of breaks it down into, again, the vehicle types, from your vans and trucks, which might be in your medium size, to medium to heavy duty, and buses. And then there's passenger, which is the lighter vehicle size. And here's a market segment that I haven't been familiar with, and it wasn't on my radar. The kind of light, I wouldn't even call it light, it's micro light or micro. The 2 to 3 wheelers, which is probably less common in our neck of the woods, like say in North America, but maybe more so in parts of the world like Southeast Asia, for example, and maybe parts of Europe as well. So you're kind of like in Thailand, I'm familiar with like the tuk-tuks, which is the 3-wheelers. Anyway, it's a big market share in terms of EV adoption. And the kind of place I go to is, but how much does that help in making a dent in climate change and displacing barrels of oil, for example? Well, to answer that question, a lot, right? So it's sheer volume, I suppose, right, in terms of number of vehicles out there, and they certainly they have made a big dent in displacing barrels of oil per day. So bringing it back to closer to home, so in North America, I'll say we have an opportunity on a per capita basis to also do our share to displace barrels of oil, because in terms of the typical vehicle owner in North America, we just do things a lot bigger. So one vehicle owner could potentially displace vehicle barrels of oil in all the market segments of the vehicle classes, from your heavy duty RV in this case, to your light duty vehicle, right down to your kind of 2, 3-wheeler. So if one owner of these 3 types of vehicles were to electrify completely, I think that'd be a pretty big dent. Yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a social commentary, but it's interesting perspective. So just moving on to the other aspect of medium heavy duty, which is kind of the off-road construction equipment. It's certainly a much earlier state of market development and adoption, but this certainly also is a key contributor to emissions. And this picture demonstrates that this is happening with Volvo. But I think what's really optimistic about this is they're offering a full product line of electric construction vehicles. So that's kind of comforting to know that they're beyond just dabbling. And right up to, in this market segment of off-road, right up to the largest kind of off-road vehicle you can imagine, mining haul trucks.
I'll just pop in for here for a second. People have to know what a huge shift it is to go to electric because all those diesel vehicles, they're started in the morning, and whether they're actually moving earth or moving anything, that diesel is on until the end of the day. Whereas for an electric, it's only actually consuming any energy when it's actually working. When it's sitting there idle, almost nothing. So yeah, those are huge numbers that can get pulled down through there.
Right. Yeah, and I totally hear you because the commercial market is that's all it's about. Like the vehicles are used all day, and worse when they're idling when they're not actually moving. And I think that the forecast is pretty optimistic as well. And I think that's because, this is um, commercial vehicles where they operate on, positive business cases. And I think it's a positive business case, and that's why the kind of positive or blustery, projection of 21% compounded average growth rate over 20 years, right? So this is from this industry analysis. Moving back to on-road vehicles, which is what I'm more familiar with, the early uptake is in larger fleets that don't have the long distances for their daily use, but they also, the key thing is these are fleets that have depots where they can put in charging infrastructure to charge their vehicles overnight once they're done their daily duties. And that's last mile applications. So your Amazons and Purolator, short haul, like food and grocery, like Pepsi and Loblaws distributing stuff. And then transit, where you have, again, depots and very predictable routes, right? So you know how long you or how far your vehicle is driving within each shift. I'm going to just show you a graph that kind of captures where the uptake is right now in BC. Again, this is based on ICBC data. So you have medium duty vehicles, and these are registrations of these vehicles, these electric vehicles. So you can see a really sharp inflection for the medium duty vehicle uptake. And again, back to the point that technology is there. The smaller vehicles, so smaller batteries, so that's a smaller price point for fleets to invest in this. And I think the business case is there. So you see this big inflection point, and I think largely due to those fleets like Purolator and Amazon who are just have decided to electrify and they're just moving forward. And heavy duty is trending upward as well, though it certainly hasn't hit that inflection point. Again, this captures a lot of different applications from short haul to regional, well, not quite regional haul, but short haul, which also includes in that middle picture drayage, which is the interesting application. So similar to maybe transit buses as an analogy, they have a fairly contained geographic area they operate in. They're basically moving shipping containers to and from the ports to kind of local distribution centers or customers that are waiting for the goods. So it's a really good application, but it also shows you where the technology is at. It's able to move into these largest of vehicles on the road. So just to kind of put it into perspective, because the question often is asked, can the grid, whether it's BC Hydro or others, but I can only speak to BC Hydro, can the grid handle this load growth from transport electrification? So the government did do a quick study that kind of forecasted the charging requirements for the electrification of the medium and heavy duty fleet up to 2040. So their forecast from the study, which is not published yet, hopefully soon, but I'm giving you a quick preview. So up to 2040, they forecast just over 100,000 medium heavy duty vehicles, electric, that is. And in terms of energy and demand on the grid, there's two aspects of that. One being the peak charging demand, like when all the vehicles are charging back at their depot, was the demand, the capacity demand on the grid. And that's 800 megawatts. So that's our ability to deliver charging to every vehicle that is charging at that time, right? So that's the peak demand forecasted. And 800 megawatts in the perspective of our grid. Site C is a good example of how to put it in perspective. Site C has the capacity to generate at 1,100 megawatts. So it's enough to cover, for example, that peak demand from 100 1,000 plus medium heavy duty vehicles charging. But in terms of energy, we certainly don't. Site C doesn't quite meet that demand, but Site C is also not meant to be an energy facility, right? I won't get into details of what that means, but it just means that we still rely on upstream charging or generation stations on our system to provide the energy, right? But it does give you a perspective of what the energy is needed for medium heavy duty vehicles over a year and what our Site C dam produces in a year.
And just for context, I believe BC Hydro's peak capacity is over 16,000 megawatts.
I used to know that number. I can't remember that
Yeah,
now.
I think it's somewhere in there. Well, 16 gigawatts or 16,000 megawatts.
Okay, so moving from what the market looks like to how we support that in terms of public charging infrastructure for trucks. So again, going back to our full complement of programs and activities at BC Hydro, here I will delve into a bit more detail on what those different aspects are because it really is a concerted effort from the different areas of the company. So starting with our kind of traditional side of the company, we have capacity planning for the system, for the grid, which is hand in hand with system upgrades. So you plan where the loads are, how much load there is coming, into the future, and then you plan to do the system upgrades to meet those demands, right? And in some cases, we have to look at alternatives. But let me just characterize what fleet charging demands look like in comparison to our traditional customers. So a fleet customer that looks at electrifying their fleet and installing charging infrastructure at their depot, like a sizable fleet, it could represent up to like 2 megawatts of new load. So to put it in perspective, that's equivalent to, say, a high-rise residential tower. So we're talking about a spot load in one location of that size. And the real difference between those two loads is the traditional kind of residential tower has a 5 to 6 year planning horizon, meaning when they have the plans in place and they've got the funding to do the project, they start talking to the utility, telling us about their project. So we know that load's coming 5 to 6 years in advance. So we can plan to do system upgrades if that local capacity in that area is not sufficient. So it could be a circuit upgrade or worse, a substation upgrade, so upstream. And the circuit upgrade could be 2 to 4 years, depending on, backlog of projects and whatnot, to 5 to 10 years for a substation. So that's certainly, somewhat aligned with the 5 to 6 year planning of a, residential tower. But the fleet is more like a 6 to 12 month horizon in terms of when they decide to do the project and when they can stand up the charging infrastructure and take delivery of the trucks. So if there's any capacity issues where we need to take time to do upgrades, that's where the misalignment comes into play, and that could certainly inhibit the market from transitioning to electric trucks. So
Is that where there's an opportunity for, say, large format batteries that are kind of like the water tank on the back of your toilet? It gives you a large flush when you need it, and then tops up from the much smaller line over time.
Line. So that's where I was going next. So, we have to look at alternative solutions, and one is distributed energy resources, which is fancy term for batteries and other kind of localized energy resources. Because it could be batteries for storage or on-site generation, right? And that's the next one. So those are kind of localized non-wire solutions. Like instead of throwing out more wire out there or substations, you could look at a very localized solution in terms of energy storage or on-site generation. Customers could also do that. So moving over to our kind of customer programs area, we do have in place already customer load displacement programs. So on our website, you'll see incentive programs that will support or provide rebates or grants to customers who want to could put in batteries or renewable on-site generation like solar to kind of offset the new load that they're going to grow in terms of, say, a fleet electrification project. Other kind of customer programs that help further the electrification of transport are rebates on the EV infrastructure side. We also have programs to help fund or co-fund feasibility studies for fleets to understand what vehicles are out there that would meet their needs, as well as understanding the charging requirements for their fleet, and right up to funding the electrical infrastructure that will feed those chargers. The last customer program I'll talk about for supporting fleet electrification are rates. So, as we have time of day rates for residential customers, we have similar fleet rates that give them a break on their bill if they're able to charge their fleet overnight, which typically most fleets that operate during the day will charge at night. So that's definitely helpful for the business case for fleet electrification. Okay, so those are the kind of other programs at BC Hydro that support fleet electrification. So focusing back on my area or the area that I work in, and that's the public charging network to support fleet electrification. So our current public charging network is focused on supporting electric vehicles or cars, but that doesn't necessarily mean that trucks can use these sites. It's about space and real estate and enough real estate for maneuverability of these larger vehicles, right? So but fortunately, we do have up to 26 sites, if not more, that have the space already to accommodate medium duty trucks, if not heavy duty trucks. So, for example, of the 140 sites, we have at least two examples here in terms of pictures. The top picture is Bell 2, which is a fairly remote station on Highway 37 going up to the Yukon border. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of space in this picture. As you can imagine, a truck coming up to maneuver itself so that the charging port in the truck can be reached by our charging station. And similar with the bottom picture, which is Lake Country, which is our largest charging hub in the Okanagan, but it also has a very spacious layout to allow trucks. And here's an example. This is the 350 kilowatt charger at Lake Country with a semi truck tractor pull up to it. Although, it is a bit of a cheat because it doesn't have its trailer, but just an example, it does. It was partly meant for truck access. But going forward, we will be building purpose-built stations that will accommodate trucks, but it's not exclusive to trucks. There will be like a gas station where any member of the general public with an EV can access the station, but it'll be big enough and the layout will be more like a pull-through layout to allow trucks to easily access the stations. So I want to give you some examples of where other jurisdictions have these kind of big charging hubs in place already. So we're definitely not leading the market in that aspect. US has certainly built a lot of these charge hubs, thanks to some big federal funding programs. And so has Europe and China. They're probably even more advanced in truck infrastructure than the US. Here's some examples. So Green Lane, this is a launch picture for Green Lane Charge Hub, the first one online of three planned. Terawatt's another charge point operator. That's the term we use to describe what BC Hydro and Tesla and others that provide public charging stations. But these are for trucks. So Terawatt has two online. This is a picture of one of their sites, 14 planned. Watt EV's been, I think, the quickest out the gate. They have 5 sites online. I believe they have 3 more in construction right now, and I don't know how many they have planned, but theirs would be one of the bigger ones. So just give you some comparison. This site has many ports, as you can see in the slide, ranging from 350 kilowatt capability to up to 1.2 megawatts or 1,200 kilowatts for one port for a total installed power of 13 megawatts. So that's a lot. That's a lot more than what I was talking about earlier when a fleet would electrify, adding 2 megawatts as a spot load. This is a 13 megawatt spot load. So this is a cluster of residential towers, which is not unheard of. Like certain dense urban centers like Hong Kong, you would see clusters of residential towers built around kind of public subway stations, for example, which is happening here in Vancouver. But this is certainly a big spot load. And again, this is very quick turnaround compared to, a cluster of, say, 4 or 5 towers, right? This is, again, probably a year in the making, um, maybe a little bit more, but that's still very quick turnaround for utility to provide 13. But just put into perspective, 13 is the install capacity. We often, as we have these big, large charging sites, we play to what we call a diversity factor, meaning not all charging ports will be, occupied or in use all at once, and not all drawing the peak rated power of the charging port. So we could probably derate that number to maybe 50% or 70% in the worst case scenario. So just so we know that we don't have to, so we know what we are looking for, right, in terms of the actual service size needed.
Looking at all these, Alec, it kind of makes me think that BC Hydro has got another business line here in medium and heavy duty trucks, perhaps having Golden, Kamloops, and Prince George as major sites where it is just for long haul, and you go out to the companies and say, hey, you want to be an early subscriber and, get in on cheaper energy and, agree to be our subscriber.
Think if you want to come out of retirement, you could be that front person for us to engage with the fleets. You have the pitch down pat. So great segue. So this is just an early planning exercise where we have said, what would it take to again repeat what we did for the car market, but for the truck market. So what does that look like province wide, right? So really, it's really two types of truck charging sites. So one for urban to kind of satisfy the, the local, regional, not regional, the local short haul truck activity where they might need a safety net or the fleets that don't have access to depot charging. So similar scenarios. Um, and potentially to extend their capable driving range of their trucks if they want to do longer delivery routes, right? So right now, that's certainly an aspect of the limitation of the technology. So it might be a near-term need, but certainly in the longer term, you're not going to have a battery that will go across Canada. So you definitely need these refueling or recharging opportunities on highway corridors. So the blue markers represent that. These are kind of planned potential locations. They're kind of located or chosen to be at existing truck stops that the Ministry of Transportation already has or are planning to build. It's also done in consultation with the trucking industry, right? So we certainly have no expertise or experience in trucking and what those kind of behaviors of the drivers and where their common stopping places are. So, for example, through those discussions and consultation with the industry, we understood that to electrify the Highway 1 corridor, for example, to do regional haul from like the shipping ports to, say, Calgary, you would need one in the Lower Mainland. So that would be, this kind of pull out or blowout of that more dense area where you might have one, two, or three locations in the Lower Mainland along the highway corridors. And then another key location would be in Kamloops, and then the third one in Golden. And ideally, that takes you into Alberta, into Calgary, right? So this is kind of like a seed network of long haul trucks to kind of kick off that market adoption for long haul when the technology is ready. Because right now, the batteries are still a bit too heavy, and maybe the charge rates are not quite high enough to enable long haul electrification. But so that means our focus will be more on the urban charge sites to kind of provide that safety net and alternatives to depot charging for the fleets that are ready to adopt and where the technology is ready.
Yeah, there's been a lot of studies. In fact, we did one ourselves, which people can look at on our YouTube site. but it also looks at, within 400 kilometers, you get something like 80% of all miles per ton traveled in North America. So yeah, if you this looks very, very doable, and we'll just have to make sure the BC Trucking Association keeps their ear to the ground and looks to the future.
So that was the what to do, but this is the how fast to do it, right? And then again, this is not set in stone yet. This is just like a kind of a bottom up, kind of estimate of what a 10-year work plan would be to build out those sites that I showed in the map. This again, the graph shows the different applications. So I did further break down the long haul charging into two other separate kind of use cases. So in addition to the urban medium heavy duty charge hubs and the long haul charge hubs, long haul is really two kind of charging scenarios. You got your daytime operation where the drivers are actually regulated to have a 30-minute break within their 8 or 10 hour shift. And that is how the megawatt charging rate was derived. Like that's the power level needed to bring a semi truck up to at least 80%, if not more, state of charge within a 30-minute break, right? So that's the megawatt charging, the MCS, the megawatt charging system, which is your kind of orange marker here. And the other aspect of long haul charging is the overnight. So at the end of the day, if their long haul route or activity is not a 1 day duration and they need it overnight to go partway across Canada, if not all the way across Canada, then the overnight is another charging aspect. So that a truck site, when we build the charging infrastructure, you'll have to um, design it for those two different charging activities. So it's a good potential leverage of the investment in terms of it's a big investment to do megawatt charging, but hopefully you don't need as many charge ports versus overnight. So the difference would be a megawatt level of power for the daytime charging. And then overnight, you would have a lot more ports that would do the overnight charging at order of magnitude less, at 100 kilowatts. So ideally, you use the same power infrastructure, like the power conversion modules, to do the daytime charging, and then use the same infrastructure to do the nighttime charging. So really increasing utilization and making this a much more positive business case. So just bringing it back to the perspective of the government study. So the government study forecasted the amount of charging ports needed for public charging for the medium heavy duty market segment to electrify out to 2040. And I just overlay that our kind of work plan for medium heavy duty truck charging onto their forecast. As you can see, the blue trend lines are what we have in our 10-year draft plan, but it's a fraction of what's needed. And that goes to the statement of, we don't expect to, and VicEVA shouldn't be the ones that provides all this charging. It is up to private sector to also play a role, similar to the light duty vehicle market. You have the traditional oil companies like Chevron, Shell, Petrocan, and your not so traditional companies like the automakers, Tesla, Electrify America, Electrify Canada. They're all contributing to this ecosystem of public charging infrastructure, and we expect the same for the trucking market.
Thank you for watching or listening to Victoria Electric Vehicle Association on YouTube. I hope you found this topic interesting. If you're looking around for other great things, we have over 100 different videos on different topics about the electric vehicle and the energy transition. Please like and subscribe to this podcast, or rather YouTube. Might turn into a podcast someday, but please do so, and we'll see you again.